The year is 1898. The world watches as two nations collide, their destinies intertwined in a conflict that will reshape the global landscape. The Spanish-American War, though brief, casts a long shadow, its effects still felt over a century later. On one side stands Spain, a once mighty empire, now grappling with decline, its colonies yearning for freedom. On the other, a young and ambitious United States, eager to prove its strength on the world stage. The conflict, sparked by the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, ignites a firestorm of change. It marks the end of an era for Spain and heralds the rise of the United States as a global power. The war's reverberations will be felt far beyond the battlefields of Cuba and the Philippines, shaping the destinies of nations and influencing the course of the 20th century. For decades, the island of Cuba had yearned to break free from Spanish colonial rule. The Cuban people, chafing under oppression, rose up in rebellion, their cries for liberty echoing across the Caribbean. The United States, with its own history of revolution and its growing economic interests in the region, watched the unfolding crisis with concern. The sinking of the USS Maine, a tragedy blamed on Spain, provided the catalyst for war. Fueled by a fervor of patriotism and a sense of righteous indignation, the United States declared war on Spain. American troops landed on Cuban soil, joining forces with Cuban rebels to fight for the island's liberation. The war for Cuba's independence would become a pivotal chapter in the history of both nations, forever linking their destinies. The Spanish-American War marked a turning point in Spain's long and storied history. Once a global superpower, with colonies spanning from the Americas to the Philippines, Spain's influence had been waning for centuries. The loss of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines delivered a crushing blow to Spain's imperial ambitions. It signaled the end of an era, forcing Spain to confront the reality of its diminished status on the world stage. The defeat had profound consequences for Spain's national psyche, leading to a period of introspection and self-examination. It also had a significant economic impact, as Spain lost valuable sources of revenue and prestige. The war served as a harsh reminder of the shifting balance of power in the world and the challenges faced by aging empires struggling to maintain their grip on a rapidly changing world. While the war spelled defeat for Spain, it marked a pivotal moment of ascendancy for the United States. The conflict, which began in 1898, was brief but intense, and its outcome had far-reaching consequences. The victory on the battlefield, coupled with the acquisition of new territories, propelled the United States into the ranks of global powers. This was not just a military triumph, but a significant geopolitical shift. The United States gained control over Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, expanding its influence far beyond its continental borders. This newfound power was reflected in the nation's political and military leadership, who were eager to assert America's presence on the global stage. The war announced to the world that the United States had come of age as a force to be reckoned with, no longer content to remain isolated from international affairs. It also marked a significant shift in American foreign policy, from one of relative isolationism to one of growing interventionism. The US began to play a more active role in global diplomacy and conflict resolution. This shift was not without controversy, as debates raged over the nation's new role and responsibility. From this point forward, the United States emerged from the war with a newfound sense of confidence and purpose on the world stage. It embraced its role as a global player, eager to exert its influence and shape the course of world events. The Spanish-American War, often referred to as America's coming out party, had a transformative effect on the nation's identity and its place in the world. It was a turning point that set the stage for America's future as a dominant global power, influencing international politics, economics, and culture for decades to come. The war's legacy is still felt today, as the United States continues to navigate its complex role on the world stage. The Spanish-American War was more than just a conflict. It was a defining moment that reshaped the nation's trajectory and solidified its place as a global power. Section 5. The Price of Freedom Unrest in the Philippines. While the war brought liberation to Cuba, it had a more complex legacy in the Philippines. The Spanish-American War of 1898 marked a turning point for both nations, but their paths diverged significantly. The Filipinos, who had been fighting for their own independence from Spain, initially welcomed the arrival of American forces. They saw the Americans as potential allies in their struggle for freedom and hoped for support in establishing their own government. However, their hopes for immediate self-rule were dashed when the United States, after defeating Spain, decided to retain control of the archipelago. This decision was driven by strategic and economic interests, as the US sought to expand its influence in the Pacific. This decision ignited a bitter and bloody conflict between American troops and Filipino revolutionaries. The Filipinos, feeling betrayed, took up arms against their former allies, leading to a protracted and brutal war. The Philippine-American War, a brutal and often overlooked chapter in American history, lasted for 3 years and resulted in the deaths of thousands of soldiers and civilians. The conflict was marked by guerrilla warfare, atrocities, and widespread destruction. It exposed the contradictions at the heart of American foreign policy, as the nation that had championed freedom for Cuba found itself embroiled in a war to suppress the independence aspirations of another people. This paradox sparked debates and protests back home in the United States. The conflict would leave a lasting legacy of resentment and mistrust between the United States and the Philippines. The scars of the war would shape the relationship between the two nations for decades to come, influencing their political, social, and cultural dynamics. Section 6. A Legacy of Liberty and Intervention, the Caribbean in the Aftermath. The Spanish-American War had a profound and lasting impact on the Caribbean region, reshaping its political landscape and ushering in an era of increased American influence. The war marked the end of Spanish colonial rule in the Americas and the beginning of a new chapter dominated by the United States. Cuba, liberated from Spanish rule, found itself under the watchful eye of its new protector, the United States. This newfound freedom came with strings attached, as American interests began to shape the island's future. The Platt Amendment, added to the Cuban Constitution, granted the United States the right to intervene in Cuban affairs and establish a naval base at Guantanamo Bay. This amendment effectively made Cuba a protectorate of the United States, ensuring American strategic interests were maintained. This interventionist policy, while ensuring stability, also limited Cuba's full sovereignty and fueled resentment among some Cubans. The presence of American troops and the influence over Cuban politics created a complex relationship between the two nations. Puerto Rico, another Spanish colony acquired by the United States in the war, also experienced a transition to American rule. The island's strategic location made it an important asset for the United States. Granted U.S. citizenship in 1917, Puerto Ricans have since grappled with the complexities of their relationship with the United States, engaging in ongoing debates about their political status and future. The island's unique status as a U.S. territory has led to discussions about statehood, independence, and the rights of its citizens. Section 7. Shifting sands of identity. The American melting pot expands. The influx of new territories and peoples into the American fold following the Spanish-American War had a profound impact on American society, challenging its sense of national identity and expanding its cultural horizons. The acquisition of Puerto Rico and the Philippines, in particular, brought large numbers of Spanish-speaking people under American jurisdiction, raising questions about their citizenship and place in American society. The integration of these new populations was a complex and often fraught process, marked by both challenges and opportunities. The war also led to a greater awareness of and engagement with Latin American culture and politics, as the United States found itself increasingly drawn into the affairs of its southern neighbors. Section 8. A Nation Transformed, from Isolation to Interventionism. The Spanish-American War marked a watershed moment in American foreign policy, signaling a definitive shift away from the nation's long-held tradition of isolationism toward a more assertive and interventionist role on the world stage. Emboldened by its victory over Spain, the United States began to flex its muscles as a global power, intervening in the affairs of other nations, particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean. The Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, articulated by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1904, formalized this interventionist approach, asserting America's right to act as a police power in the Western Hemisphere. The war also led to a dramatic expansion of the American military, setting the stage for its emergence as a global military superpower in the 20th century. Section 9. The enduring ripple effects, a world shaped by conflict. The Spanish-American War, though a distant event in the annals of history, continues to resonate in the 21st century. Its legacy can be seen in the complex relationship between the United States and its former colonies, the political dynamics of the Caribbean, and the rise of the United States as a global superpower. The war's impact on international relations is undeniable. It marked the decline of European colonialism and the rise of American power and influence. It also set the stage for future conflicts and interventions as the United States grappled with its newfound role as a global player. The echoes of 1898 continue to reverberate today, reminding us of the enduring power of history to shape our world.